There's this question that has been bugging theologians and philosophers for, well, centuries, and it's a big one. If God is supposedly all-powerful and all-good, then why is there so much evil and suffering in the world? Today, we're going to dive deep into this problem of evil and see why the most popular answer might not actually be an answer at all.
And hey, this isn't a new problem. Way back, an early Christian writer named Lactantius laid out the paradox just perfectly. It's like a trap. It forces you into what feels like an impossible choice. Either God isn't really all-powerful, or God isn't really all that good. It's a simple question for sure, but the answer's not so easy.
So what's the way out of this? Well, for thousands of years, there's been one go-to answer, a defense that you hear all the time. It's just two simple words: free will.
And the argument, you've probably heard it, right? It goes something like this. God, in his wisdom, gave us the incredible gift of free will, but we're the ones who messed it up. We used that freedom to choose evil. So the blame for all the pain and suffering, well, that's on us, not on God. And on the surface, that sounds pretty solid. It seems to wrap it all up in a neat little bow.
Okay, but let's really kick the tires on this idea. Just for the sake of argument, let's say this kind of free will is totally real. The bigger question is, does this defense actually work? Does it truly get God off the hook for all the bad stuff in the world?
To put this to the test, let's use a powerful analogy. Forget all the high-level theology for a minute and just picture something super simple, something down to earth, a lifeguard on a beach.
Okay, picture this. There's a kid out in the water and he's in real trouble, getting dragged out by a nasty undertow. And the lifeguard, the one person with the power and skill to save him, just sits there. He watches. Maybe he shouts some advice, swim sideways, but he never actually gets out of his chair to help. And when you ask him why, his excuse is, hey, the boy went into the water on his own. It was his free will.
So what do you think? Do we buy that excuse? Is that lifeguard really blameless? Of course not. No way. We all kind of get intuitively that just permitting a disaster to happen when you have the power to stop it doesn't exactly make you innocent.
And here's where it gets really interesting. The argument is that this analogy is actually way too generous to the free will defense. Think about it. A human lifeguard has limits, right? He didn't create the kid. He didn't create the ocean. That undertow is a force of nature that's totally independent of him. But an all-powerful creator, by definition, that creator made everything, the person, the world they live in, and every single force at play. Nothing is independent.
And this leads to a pretty mind-bending conclusion. The whole idea of permission kind of starts to break down. You can only permit something if it's separate from you, a force you don't control, like the lifeguard in the ocean. But if you control all the forces, if everything operates because you allow it to, then permitting something to happen starts to look a whole lot like willing it to happen.
The famous theologian John Calvin had a really blunt take on this. He basically asked, if God permits something, what possible reason could there be other than, on some level, it's what he wills? And when you look at it that way, suddenly the free will defense doesn't look like a solution anymore. It just looks like it's kicking the can down the road.
So if that whole free will defense doesn't really hold up, then what? Where do we go from here? Well, it pushes us toward a radically different idea, one that doesn't try to get God off the hook, but actually redefines his role in the whole thing. And this is called divine determinism.
And you really can't get two more opposite ideas. On one hand, you have free will, which says our choices are ultimately our own, independent of God. But on the other hand, you have divine decree, which says that everything that happens, and I mean everything, including our choices, is ordained by God as part of a sovereign plan.
And proponents of this view point to a pretty shocking example right in the heart of the Christian story, the crucifixion. In the book of Acts, it says that the people responsible for it were gathered together to do what God's purpose had determined before to be done. The text itself seems to suggest that the greatest evil in that story was, somehow, part of the plan.
Okay, and right away, this brings up the biggest, most obvious objection, right? If God determines everything we do, then what are we? Are we just puppets? Is all our choice just an illusion?
Well, to get at that, we have to make a really important distinction. This view denies free will in the sense that you could have chosen otherwise, like you couldn't have picked chocolate if you were determined to pick vanilla. But it strongly affirms what's called free agency, and that means you still chose vanilla because you genuinely wanted it. You acted voluntarily, based on your own desires, without anyone physically forcing you. Judas betrayed Jesus because he wanted to, even if that desire itself was part of a much bigger, predetermined picture.
So what this does is it completely flips our idea of what responsibility even means. It's no longer about whether you could have done something different. Instead, being responsible just means you are accountable to a higher authority. And in this framework, God is the ultimate authority, the one who literally sets the terms and defines what justice is in the first place.
And this all leads to a really staggering conclusion, which John Calvin doesn't shy away from at all. He basically says justice isn't some outside standard that God has to follow. No, God's will is the standard. Whatever God wills is just, because he wills it. It's a view that makes divine will the absolute central reality of everything.
So we're left with this huge, looping paradox. If a single act can be both determined by God and be the complete and sole responsibility of the person who does it, what does that do to our everyday ideas about fairness and justice? It forces us to ask a really tough question. Is our understanding of justice just a human thing, or is it something else entirely?